Welcome back, Deep Divers. Today we're diving into a mystery that still chills Australia, like to its core.
hmm
The disappearance of the Beaumont children.
Yeah.
And you've given us a stack of sources this time. We've got articles, witness accounts, the works, and it seems like you guys are particularly interested in the suspects linked to this case.
It's a case that captivated a nation, and yeah, the list of potential culprits is as intriguing as it is disheartening.
So to get into the minds of these suspects, we need to kind of like rewind the clock, right? Back to 1966, Australia Day, to be exact.
Okay.
Picture this. Adelaide is sizzling, the beaches are buzzing, and life seems, I don't know, simpler then.
Right. It was a time when kids, especially in a seemingly safe community like Glenelg, had a freedom that might seem, unimaginable today.
Right. And it was on this sunny Australia Day that the Beaumont children, so that's 9-year-old Jane, 7-year-old Arna, and little 4-year-old Grant, they head off for a day of fun at Glenelg Beach, a place they knew like the back of their hand.
Right.
Their parents, Jim, a taxi driver, and Nancy, see them off, thinking, it's just another regular summer day.
A day that would tragically transform their lives and Australia's forever.
Yeah, because, of course, the children never came home. Now, we could spend, this entire deep dive on the events of that day, but it seems like you're keen on the suspects, so let's get right to the heart of it.
Yeah, let's do it. And one of the most chilling possibilities emerged years later with a name that sends chills down the spines of many Australians, Bevan Spencer von Einem.
Okay, von Einem.
Yeah.
Already a convicted murderer for the death of Richard Kelvin.
Right.
A case that, by the way, absolutely rocked South Australia in the 80s.
Definitely.
So, what makes von Einem such a haunting figure in the Beaumont case is that he actually resembled the identikit pictures, right?
Yeah.
Created from those initial Mungus descriptions of the man last seen with the Beaumont shovel.
That's right.
So imagine the chills running down investigators' spines when they realize this resemblance. We're talking about a man already convicted of a horrific crime that shared eerie similarities with what was suspected to have happened to the Beaumont children.
It's like stumbling upon a possible connection that feels almost too sinister to be true.
Right. And then there's the whole thing with the informant, Mr. B, claiming that von Einem had bragged about taking 3 children from a beach years earlier for these twisted experiments.
Right.
And he actually the informant used the word surgery, which you know anything about von Einem's other crimes.
Yeah, it paints a horrifying picture.
It does.
However, there is a significant hitch with von Einem. He was only in his early 20s when the Beaumonts disappeared.
Right.
This is much younger than the man described by those crucial eyewitnesses.
Yeah, and that age difference really tripped up investigators, right? It's like trying to fit a square peg in a round hole.
Yeah.
The ages just don't line up neatly.
Yeah.
While appearances can be deceiving, and even age can be misjudged, what often remains consistent in cases like this is the perpetrator's modus operandi, their MO.
Okay, break that down for us. What does MO mean in this context, and why is it so important?
It's essentially the perpetrator's pattern of behavior. So, their preferred victims, the way they approach them, the types of locations they target.
Right.
And with von Einem, his established MO involved teenage boys, not young children like the Beaumonts.
So while the possibility of von Einem's involvement is terrifying, that MO discrepancy throws a wrench in the works.
It does. But the story doesn't end there. Remember those chilling Adelaide Oval abductions that happened in '73?
Yeah.
2 young boys last seen with a man fitting a similar description to the Beaumont case.
Wait, are you suggesting that those cases might be connected?
There's a very real possibility, especially since some people believe von Einem could be linked to the Oval abductions.
It's like this unsettling echo, this phantom figure appearing at the edges of multiple tragedies. And to make it even creepier, there's that archival footage from the original Beaumont search, right?
You're talking about the footage where a young man bearing a striking resemblance to von Einem appears in the background?
That's the one. It's grainy, sure, but still it makes you think, what if?
It's a tantalizing clue in a case full of them.
Yeah.
But let's shift gears to another suspect whose name has become almost synonymous with Australian true crime, Arthur Stanley Brown.
Now, Brown is a whole other level of unsettling. This is a man who was actually charged with the murders of 2 young sisters in Queensland back in 1970.
Right.
And the details, it's like looking into a terrifying mirror image of what is believed to have happened to the Beaumont children. Their bodies were found in a dry creek bed, left to the elements.
And what makes Brown such a compelling figure in the Beaumont case is that, like von Einem, He also bore a strong resemblance to those witness descriptions. It's like there's this recurring theme, this shadowy figure appearing in the periphery of these heartbreaking cases.
Right. And remember how Jane Beaumont, she apparently used a 1-pound note at the bakery, which seemed way out of character for her and totally beyond their budget.
Yeah, a detail that at the time seemed insignificant, but when you consider that Phipps was known to carry around wads of 1-pound notes and hand them out, even to children.
Okay, that's just creepy. It's like a tiny detail suddenly becomes a floodlight.
Exactly. And if that's not enough, Brown allegedly confessed to a fellow inmate, claiming he knew that the Beaumont children would never be found.
I mean, talk about a chilling statement. It sends shivers down your spine just thinking about it.
It does make you wonder what Brown knew or thought he knew.
Right. But hold on, because just like von Einem, there's a twist. Brown was in his 50s when the Beaumonts vanished. Again, it doesn't quite line up with the descriptions of that younger man seen with the children.
The age discrepancy is significant, but eyewitness testimony can be unreliable, especially in high-stress situations.
Right.
People can misjudge age, especially when faced with a traumatic event.
It's true. Memories are fragile things, prone to distortion and influenced by time. But still, that age difference, it makes you wonder.
It does. And what's frustrating is that there's no concrete evidence placing Brown in Adelaide in 1966. Records from that time are spotty, perhaps lost in the Brisbane floods of '74.
So we're left with this unsettling cloud of suspicion, but no real answers. It's enough to make your head spin.
It's the nature of cold cases, unfortunately. They often leave us with more questions than answers.
Speaking of questions, the name James Ryan O'Neill also pops up in connection with this case. He's currently doing time for the murder of a 9-year-old boy in Tasmania. What's his link to the Beaumont children?
O'Neill's case is an interesting one, though. His connection to the Beaumont children is built more on whispers and speculation than hard evidence.
Okay, so walk us through it. What makes him a person of interest in this tangled web?
Well, there have been whispers for years that O'Neill confessed to the Beaumont abductions.
Really?
Not to police, but to acquaintances.
Oh.
And even when authorities questioned him, he kind of danced around a straight denial.
Danced around. You're going to have to elaborate on that one because that sounds seriously fishy.
So instead of just saying, I didn't do it, he would give these slippery non-denials, like I couldn't have done it, I was in Melbourne.
Right.
Sounds like a denial, but it conveniently avoids confirming or denying his presence in Adelaide.
Ah, so he's playing like a calculated game of semantics.
Mm-hmm.
Clever, but also super shady.
Exactly. And while O'Neill claims he never set foot in Adelaide during that time, there are gaps in his alibi, like missing puzzle pieces. You see, his work in the opal industry back then was meant a lot of travel.
Right.
Maybe even passing through Adelaide on his way to the opal fields of Coober Pedy.
So there's a chance he could have been in the vicinity of the Beaumont disappearance without anyone being the wiser.
Precisely. However, to be fair, despite these shadows of doubt, South Australian police have officially ruled him out as a suspect in the Beaumont case.
Okay.
At least for now, anyway.
Okay, so another suspect bites the dust, or at least fades into the background noise of this case. Who else is on the list?
Well, brace yourself for this one because it's a name that sends chills down the spines of many Australians. Derek Ernest Percy.
Oh, wow. Percy. Now, he was a convicted child killer, right?
Mm-hmm.
But wasn't he already behind bars when the Beaumonts disappeared?
Not quite. Percy was ultimately convicted of the murder of young Yvonne Toohey in 1969, and he stayed locked up until his death in 2013. But, and this is where it gets really unsettling, his potential connection to the Beaumont case hinges on the possibility that his crimes started earlier than anyone initially realized.
You're saying there's a chance he was active before his known spree of violence, like a predator lurking in the shadows, waiting for the right moment to strike.
It's a chilling thought, and there's another layer to this. Percy suffered from a severe psychological condition that made it difficult for him to remember details, especially during times of intense stress or violence.
So we're talking about a potential perpetrator who might not even remember if they committed the crime. Talk about a nightmare scenario for investigators and, of course, for the families involved.
Absolutely. And to add fuel to the fire, there are reports of Percy hinting at a possible connection to the Beaumont case, like saying that he might have been in Adelaide at the time, but can't recall specifics.
It's like trying to catch smoke. Just when you think you have a grasp on something, it slips through your fingers. But if Percy was already in prison when those Adelaide Oval abductions occurred, wouldn't that rule him out as a suspect in that case?
You'd think so, right? And most people believe that's the case. It seems highly unlikely he could have been involved in both.
Okay, so Percy is another name on this tragically long list, but like so many others in this case, there's no smoking gun. No irrefutable evidence. Which brings us to another suspect who emerged more recently, Alan Anthony Monroe.
Ah, Monroe. Now, his connection to the case is a winding road, starting with a man named Alan Maxwell McIntyre.
Okay.
He'd been investigated and cleared of involvement in the disappearance, but then in 2015, he drops a bombshell.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat. What did McIntyre reveal?
He claimed that he knew Monroe back in '66. And get this, that Monroe showed up at his house with the bodies of the Beaumont children in the trunk of his car.
Wait, what? That's horrifying. Why on earth would he wait so long to come forward with this?
McIntyre's explanation was that he and his children initially mistook Arna's body for a boy's because of her short hair.
Oh.
It wasn't until later, when the shock wore off, that they realized the full weight of what they'd seen.
Oh my God. That's unimaginable.
And here's the thing about Monroe. He was no stranger to the wrong side of the law. This was a former scoutmaster with a history of preying on children. In fact, in 2017, he was sentenced to 10 years for a series of child sex offenses, dating back to the early 60s.
So he definitely fits the profile of someone capable of such a horrific act. Did anything come of McIntyre's claims? Was there any evidence to back them up?
In a bizarre twist, police were given a child's diary from 1966 that seemed to place Monroe near Glenelg Beach around the time the Beaumont children vanished.
A child's diary. It's eerie and heartbreaking all at the same time.
And it really is. And to make it even stranger, the diary belonged to one of McIntyre's sons who was allegedly abused by Monroe.
Wow. What are the odds? It's like something out of a movie, except this is all too real.
As much as this diary seemed to connect the dots, Adelaide police, despite multiple investigations into Monroe, never found that direct, irrefutable link to the Beaumont case.
So another dead end. It seems like every time investigators get close, the trail runs cold.
That's the cruel irony of cold cases. Sometimes they feel like a puzzle with missing pieces, no matter how hard you try to fit everything together.
Well, we've navigated through a labyrinth of suspects so far, but there's still one name on our list, and it's a big one. Harry Phipps. Tell me everything.
Harry Phipps.
Yeah.
His name had been swirling around the edges of the Beaumont case for decades.
Right.
Whispered in hushed tones, but it wasn't until relatively recently that he truly landed in the spotlight.
Because before that, Phipps was just, a wealthy factory owner, one of Adelaide's elite, living a life seemingly untouched by, the darkness of the Beaumont case.
Exactly. He was almost an open secret, someone rumored to have been involved, but no one could pin anything concrete on him.
Right.
Then, in 2013, a book titled The Satin Man blew the case wide open.
The book itself didn't actually name Phipps directly, did it? It was more like a cryptic puzzle, right?
Right, it danced around his identity, but Phipps's own son, Hayden, confirmed that his father was the Satin Man. Talk about a family bombshell.
It's like something out of a psychological thriller, right?
Yeah.
Suddenly, the son of this prominent figure is thrust into the center of this infamous cold case. So what exactly pointed to Phipps as a suspect? Give us the rundown.
Well, for starters, those early witness descriptions of the man last seen with the children.
Yeah.
Tall, thin, in his 40s at the time, that fit Phipps like a glove.
Okay, but we've seen with von Einem and Brown that appearances can be deceiving. Was there anything more substantial linking Phipps to the Beaumont children?
Remember how that shopkeeper recalled Jane Beaumont using a £1 note at the bakery? A detail that seemed so out of place at the time.
Yes. I remember thinking, where would a young girl get that kind of money? It seems strange, but I never would have guessed.
Well, get this. Phipps was known to carry around stacks of £1 notes and hand them out freely, even to children.
Okay, now that's just creepy. It's like this seemingly insignificant detail suddenly becomes a major red flag.
Exactly. And if that wasn't enough, Phipps's own son, Hayden, claimed he saw the Beaumont children in his father's yard on the very day they disappeared.
Hold on, his own son. Why wouldn't he have come forward sooner?
Hayden was only 15 at the time. He claimed to have repressed the memory for years, only for it to resurface decades later.
Wow.
Whether that's true or not is a matter of debate, but it added fuel to the fire.
It definitely complicates things, but it gets even more unsettling. Two other people, teenagers back in '66, they said that Phipps paid them to dig a huge hole in his factory yard that very same weekend.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
You can imagine how those claims, combined with everything else, sent investigators into overdrive. It was like they were finally piecing together a puzzle that had haunted them for years.
So did they ever actually search Phipps' property?
They did. In 2013, driven by Hayden's claims and a ground-penetrating radar analysis that suggested something might be buried there, police excavated a section of the factory. But, and this is the heartbreaking part, they found nothing substantial.
Another dead end. It's like every time it seems like there's a breakthrough in this case, it's another agonizing letdown.
It's the cruel reality of cold cases. But the story doesn't end there. In 2018, armed with new information and advances in forensic technology, police decided to give it another shot, excavating a different area of the factory.
So there was still a sliver of hope. A chance that maybe, just maybe, they could uncover the truth.
That's the thing about cases like this. There's always that sliver of hope, that flicker in the darkness. But again, the excavation came up empty, no sign of the Beaumont children. And with Phipps's death in 2004, whatever secrets he may have had went with him to the grave.
Wow, what a tangled web we've uncovered today. Von Einem, Brown, O'Neill, Percy, Monroe, Phipps. Each name like a chilling possibility, a path leading to a different dead end. It's overwhelming to think about, really.
It really highlights the complexity of cold cases, especially when dealing with the fog of time, unreliable memories, and the possibility that someone, somewhere, is desperately trying to hide the truth.
It makes you realize how fragile truth can be, how easily it can slip through our fingers. Well, deep divers, we've reached the end of another deep dive into the heart of a mystery. But as we've learned today, some mysteries refuse to stay buried, continuing to spark debate, fuel investigations, and linger in our collective consciousness. What stands out to you as the most perplexing thing about all the suspects linked to this case?
It's the way they all seem to circle around the truth.
Yeah.
Moths drawn to a flame, but none of them get close enough to be burned. It's that agonizing lack of closure that makes this case so haunting.
It truly is a chilling thought. Well, deep divers, we're out of time for today, but we want to hear from you.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on the suspects in the Beaumont case? Head over to our social media and share your theories. Until next time, deep divers, stay curious and never stop searching for answers.